Okay, the simulation argument, why the probability that you are living in a matrix is quite high, by Nick Bostrom. Let me say first that we also have the reading guide, and you should have that printed out and you should read it. There's a lot in the reading guide that will help you understand what Bostrom is doing in this short article, and we'll look at both. I'll look at both in this video. But we'll start here. The Matrix got many otherwise not so philosophical minds ruminating on the nature of reality. But the scenario depicted in the movie is ridiculous. Human brains being kept in tanks by intelligent machines just to produce power. There is, however, a related scenario that is more plausible and a serious line of reasoning that leads from the possibility of this scenario to a striking conclusion about the world we live in. I call this the simulation argument. Perhaps its most startling lesson is that there's a significant probability that you are living in a computer simulation. I mean this literally. If the simulation hypothesis is true, you exist in a virtual reality simulated on a computer built by some advanced civilization. Your brain, too, is merely a part of this simulation. Okay, let me point out that there is a difference between the simulation hypothesis, which is this statement here, you exist in a virtual reality simulated in a computer built by some advanced civilization, and the simulation argument, which Bostrom mentions here, and the argument itself is at the top of the next page, top of page 2. What grounds could we have for taking this hypothesis seriously? Before getting to the gist of the simulation argument, let us consider some of its preliminaries. Okay, so there's two preliminaries. One of these is the assumption of substrate independence, and then the other preliminary is down here at the bottom of the page. Okay, the assumption of substrate independence. This is the idea that conscious minds could, in principle, be implemented not only on carbon-based biological neurons, such as those inside your head, but also on some other computational substrate, such as silicon-based processors. Okay, now let's look at this. And again, you should read this whole thing. I'm just going to read parts of it, but I will go over this. The simulation that is the topic of this article is sort of like a computer game, except that the individuals in it are conscious. That is, they each have an inner life. Okay, so the beings in this simulation would be like us. So they can experience emotions, feel pain, experience the smell of coffee and biting into a lemon, and so forth. And the game is completely lifelike. It's indistinguishable from what we experience every day. Unlike a computer game, however, there are no players who control each specific movement of the people in the simulation. Someone or a group would have created the simulation, and then they just let it run. Although if they wanted to interfere with the simulation, presumably they could at any time. Okay, so if we and our whole world exist in a computer simulation, then the creators of the simulation are not necessarily human beings, although they are members of an intelligent species. If they created us to look just like them, then they would be human or something similar, but they could also be a completely different kind of species. All right, so to be clear, or just to explain this, for this paper, we're thinking about intelligent life that could be anywhere in the universe. Okay, so this is assuming that there is other intelligent life in the universe, not in our solar system and not necessarily in our galaxy, but in the universe. The crucial step for making the claim that there is other intelligent life out there is realizing that the universe is really, really big. Galaxies are huge. There are tens of billions of solar systems in our galaxy. Okay, so the solar system is kind of what we learn about outer space, our sun, and then the planets in our solar system, Mars, Earth, Jupiter, Saturn. So that's just a solar system. That solar system is embedded within the Milky Way galaxy, and there are tens of billions of solar systems in our galaxy. So just like some number of planets orbiting one star, orbiting a sun, there are tens of billions of those in our Milky Way galaxy, and there are over 100 billion galaxies in the universe. Thus, the possibility of other intelligent life somewhere is quite high. Even if the probability that any particular planet in the universe has intelligent life on it is minuscule, there are so many planets that it's almost 100% certain that there's some other intelligent life in the universe. Okay, and while I'm on this page, let me also just point out, at the end of paragraph 5 on the first page, Bostrom says, the upshot of such an analysis is that a technologically mature civilization, okay, they have some more, but technologically mature civilization is one that, one is far beyond us in terms of the technology that they've developed, And they would be, in particular, a civilization that is able to create these kinds of computer simulations that we're talking about in this article. Okay, we'll come back to this. Right now, let's go back here. Of course, the computers we have today are not powerful enough to run the computational processes that take place in your brain. Even if they were, we wouldn't know how to program them to do it. But ultimately, what allows you to have conscious experiences is not the fact that your brain is made of squishy biological matter, but rather that it implements a certain computational architecture. This assumption is quite widely, although not universally, accepted among cognitive scientists and philosophers of mind. For the purposes of this article, we shall take it for granted. Okay, so this is one preliminary assumption, that substrate independence, that a conscious mind can exist not only in a biological brain, but also on a computer in particular. Okay, so if we go back to here, there's a lot packed into the idea of substrate independence. Bostrom explains what it means, and you've had some exposure to this topic from reading the chapter on mind. In brief, substrate independence is the idea that the substrate, or material, that a conscious mind is made of doesn't matter. Even if this seems like a big and perhaps unusual idea, in the chapter on mind, we found that dualism doesn't work as a theory of mind. That just leaves monism, the idea that everything, including the mind, is made of physical material, and that's all that's needed to claim that substrate independence is possible. It might take thousands of years to figure out how to build the computers and write the programs that can run the processes that take place in your brain, but however long it takes doesn't matter for Bostrom's argument. Okay, one other thing actually to mention about technologically mature civilizations. I'm not sure if it's in this reading guide, but this is also based on the age of the universe. So, I have this written down somewhere, I think. Yeah, okay, so the universe is 14 billion years old, and maybe it took a billion years, give or take, for everything to kind of settle out after the Big Bang. Earth itself is 4.5 plus billion years old, and life on Earth is roughly 3.8 billion years old. Okay, so we have this, in our universe as we understand it, 14 billion or maybe 13 billion year window for life to develop. For us on Earth, if everything we understand about our universe is correct, it took 3.8 billion years from the first appearance of life to where we are now, but somewhere else in the universe, that 3.8 billion years or 4 or 5 billion years could have started earlier. So a technologically mature civilization could be existing at this same point in time, but if they got an earlier start, or they would have had to have gotten an earlier start in order to be more technologically advanced than where we are right now. So in addition to the size of the universe, the age of the universe also has a role here. Okay, let's see. For the purposes of this article, we shall take substrate independence for granted. Given substrate independence, it is in principle possible to implement a human mind on a sufficiently fast computer. Doing so would require very powerful hardware that we do not yet have. It would also require advanced programming abilities or sophisticated ways of making a very detailed scan of a human brain that could then be uploaded to the computer. Although we will not be able to do this in the near future, the difficulty appears to be merely technical. There is no known physical law or material constraint that would prevent a sufficiently technologically advanced civilization from implementing human minds in computers. Our second preliminary is that we can estimate, at least roughly, how much computing power it would take to implement a human mind along with a virtual reality that would seem completely realistic for it to interact with. Furthermore, we can establish lower bounds on how powerful the computers of an advanced civilization could be. Technological futurists have already produced designs for physically possible computers that could be built using advanced molecular manufacturing technology. Okay, so I don't know exactly what he has in mind here, but technological futurists would just be people that, given the laws of physics and the knowledge of chemistry and whatever else, they've produced designs for computers that are possible but can't yet be built. So maybe quantum computers or something like that. The upshot of such an analysis is that a technologically mature civilization that has developed at least those technologies that we already know are physically possible would be able to build computers powerful enough to run an astronomical number of human-like minds, even if only a tiny fraction of their resources was used for that purpose. Okay, so the second preliminary is that given what we know or what we think we know about the kinds of computers that could be built, can be built in the future, could be built now by a technologically mature civilization, those computers would be powerful enough to run these kind of simulations and they wouldn't exhaust that civilization's resources, in particular its energy resources. Okay, an astronomical number of human-like minds. I'm going to talk more about this later, but this is also here on page 2 in the reading guide. Actually, down here at the bottom and then on to page 3. But we'll look at that in a moment. If you are such a simulated mind, there might be no direct observational way for you to tell. The virtual reality that you would be living in would look and feel perfectly real. But all this shows so far is that you could never be completely sure that you are not living in a simulation. This result is only moderately interesting. You could still regard the simulation hypothesis as too improbable to be taken seriously. Now we get to the core of the simulation argument. Okay, so this is the argument. It consists of these 3 propositions. Right here, Bostrom refers to them as propositions. This is what they are. By propositions, we just mean a statement or a declarative sentence. And so the argument is we have these 3 propositions, these 3 statements, and one of them has to be true. But the argument itself doesn't say which one is. Okay, so since it doesn't say which one is, this does not purport to demonstrate that you are in a simulation. Instead, it shows that we should accept as true at least one of the following 3 propositions. Okay, the first. The chances that a species at our current level of development can avoid going extinct before becoming technologically mature is negligibly small. Okay, so what this is saying is that species at our current level, technologically advanced but not technologically mature, we haven't reached the stage where we can create these kind of simulations. Maybe all species at our current level go extinct, everywhere in the universe, go extinct before they can make these kinds of computer simulations that can simulate conscious beings. Okay, so then down here at the bottom of the page, Bostrom talks about Proposition 1. Let us consider the options in a little more detail. Possibility 1 is relatively straightforward. For example, maybe there is some highly dangerous technology that every sufficiently advanced civilization develops and which then destroys them. Let us hope that this is not the case. Okay, so everywhere in the universe, maybe species that are basically where we are right now are all or almost all of them are going to go extinct, maybe because they all develop highly dangerous technologies that wipe them out. There are other possibilities. Maybe they all do too much environmental damage to the planet they're living on or anywhere else they go, any other planets they go to. Maybe a virus wipes them out. So there are a lot of possibilities, although, of course, that our species and all species like us go extinct isn't a very appealing option, but it's one of the options. Proposition 2, almost no technologically mature civilizations are interested in running computer simulations of minds like ours. Okay, so Proposition 2 is saying there are some civilizations, some species that do reach the stage where they can create these kinds of simulations, but they don't want to do it. So again, at the bottom, Possibility 2 requires that there is a strong convergence among all sufficiently advanced civilizations. Almost none of them is interested in running computer simulations of minds like ours, and almost none of them contain any relatively wealthy individuals who are interested in doing that and are free to act on their desires. One can imagine various reasons that may lead some civilizations to forego running simulations, but for 2 to obtain, that is for 2 to be true, virtually all civilizations would have to do that. Okay, so for my money, I would say that probably if it were possible to run these kinds of computer simulations, not everyone would want to do it, and some people might have good reasons for not wanting to do it or not thinking that other people should do it. But still, on balance, I would imagine that some people would if it were possible. But some reasons why you might not do it, maybe for moral reasons. You might think that it's not morally acceptable to create a simulation that includes conscious beings that can suffer and can feel pain. You might think that even if it doesn't take a lot of resources to run this kind of simulation, that no resources should be spent on it. and maybe there are other reasons also. Okay, but if that was true, if for whatever reason all species, or virtually all species, all civilizations agreed that these kinds of computer simulations shouldn't be created, that would constitute an interesting constraint on the future evolution of advanced intelligent life. Okay, if they all, not communicating with each other, but everywhere in the universe, all intelligent species came to the same decision, that would be an interesting constraint on the future evolution of advanced intelligent life. Okay, and then third, you're almost certainly in a simulation. Okay, so again, the idea is that one of these has to be true. Maybe all species go extinct before they can create the simulation, or maybe they don't go extinct before they can do it, but none of them do it, none of them want to do it. Or third, you, all of us, are almost certainly in a computer simulation. Each of these three propositions may be prima facie implausible, that is, at first glance, yet if the simulation argument is correct, at least one of them is true. It doesn't tell us which.